Good afternoon. The death toll linked to the anti-tax protests in Kenya has climbed to now at least 22. On Tuesday, protests turned violent. Police opened fire when an angry mob stormed Kenya's parliament. Thousands of people have taken to the streets in the last week to protest against new tax laws. Today, several Kenyan NGOs have commended citizens who have come out to defend their rights.
I would like to remind all of us that this is a constitutional right that is enshrined in our Constitution, Article 37, that provides for the right to association, the right to assembly, the right to picket, and the right to petition. This organic and independent movement has shown us the way that Kenyans can voice themselves. And so there's absolutely nothing wrong with Kenyans getting onto the streets to voice themselves. This is a constitutional provision as per the Kenya Constitution 2010.
We remind the president that the power he holds is given to him by Kenyans. If he had not been elected by Kenyans, he would be a vegetable farmer in Sugoi. But he's there because he has been elected. He should therefore respect the will of the people and their constitutional rights. He must stop threatening Kenyans. There is nothing treasonous in Kenyans coming out to demonstrate, nothing. And we say, in support of the protesters and in support of all Kenyans, that he should not sign that bill which was passed by parliamentarians whom the people of Kenya do not recognize as so far.
Joseph Ochieno is a writer and commentator on African affairs, joins us now. Joseph, good afternoon to you. President William Ruto in Kenya now wants to deploy the military to stop these protests. I mean, that surely is just going to intensify the situation quite dramatically. Is there a risk of maybe even more violence in Kenya right now?
Thanks for having me. I'm not quite sure who advised him so badly yesterday, particularly after the peak of the tragedy, and then there was a declaration that there was going to be a statement from State House, quite rightly at 9 o'clock. Everybody else waited for that. And in the statement where I think all Kenyans and all those of us Africans who are concerned about this, indeed the global community, who are expecting some sense of humility, responsibility and leadership for all Kenyans, and perhaps even expressing a regret to the families, particularly, and indeed condolences to the families that lost themselves. The guy came out fighting as if it was really a battle in some kind of a militarized zone. The tone was rather sharp, and it's not surprising some of the comments you're receiving from some of the people on your clips down there, talking about treason, talking about calling these demonstrators criminals. Considering the history of Kenya, particularly in the last 15 years, it's surprising that a Kenyan president would come like that. So in any case, people are now looking less about the grounds beyond the conflicts or perhaps events leading to the killings, which are extremely atrocious, but rather the manner in which the president is handling it within the last 24 hours.
I mean, over the weekend, he seemed to be saying he was willing to speak to the people who are demonstrating. Now he's sending in not just the police, but soldiers. I mean, something must have shifted.
You're absolutely right. And then, of course, he also talked about the demonstrations being infiltrated. And indeed, demonstrations may be infiltrated, but usually by a few people. And normally, if demonstrations are infiltrated, it's the responsibility of the state to detect that. But when the police, the state detects that, law enforcement, normally usually led by the police, not the military, their job is basically to enforce and to make sure that you check that, meaning identify who are these infiltrators, who are these invaders, get them and deal with them in accordance with the law. Do you know, I actually find it extremely hard that in Kenya, in a relative calm state within the region of East Africa, would have his police officers coming out and to shoot, to kill, like they did particularly yesterday. And in any case, actually, you're absolutely right. He was right, though, that people were hailing Kenyan demonstrators the other day when the day before demonstrators escorted a police van in a peaceful protest. It is when these guys crossed granted the perimeter walls of the parliament. At that stage, after really the incident of killings, after killings had already occurred. I'm not the expert on this, nor am I a ballistic expert. It was that stage when these guys, you provoke them, it has gone so far. It's not surprising that going into the assembly, it was destruction. But I'm not sure it was the best way to approach this, nor am I sure necessarily the case that this is going to be the best way forward. For the history of Kenya, I think President Ruto is playing a very, very different game for the moment.
Joseph, I'm just going to ask you to stop there for a moment. Joseph Ochieno is a writer and commentator on African affairs.